Good morning. How are you?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
So we have kicked off. Okay.
Just slide the button.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to TMC RMC. In the unlikely event of an emergency, there are stairwells to my left, to my right, left and right. Go down to the first level, 2nd Avenue and Adams at the Orpheum Theater is our staging location. Fire extinguishers located in the back of the room. AED CPR to my left in the break room. CPR AED certified, raise your hand. All right, over there, and at least 2 people who can be backup and alternate, or alternate and primary for 911. Anyone? Yes, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Transit and Rail Management Committee's joint meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. The first order of business is for Pat to call the roll.
Good morning. City of Avondale, Charlene Pinella. City of Buckeye, Dan Cotterman. City of Chandler, Jason Crampton.
Here.
City of El Mirage, Autumn Grooms. Town of Fountain Hills, Dave Trimble.
Here.
Town of Gilbert, Mary Goodman. City of Glendale, Kevin Phelps.
Here.
City of Goodyear, Wynette Reed.
Here.
Maricopa County, Elijah Laban. City of Mesa, Chris Brady. City of Peoria, Chris Hallett.
Here.
City of Phoenix, Mario Paniagua.
Here.
Town of Queen Creek, Bruce Gardner.
Here.
City of Scottsdale, Mark Melanchenko.
Here.
City of Surprise, Tracy Montgomery.
Here.
City of Tempe, Andrew Ching. City of Tolleson, Reyes Medrano. And ADOT Shatwan Reed. Chair, we're ready to proceed.
Thank you very much, Pat. So just a reminder of a couple of things. If a committee member would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please just let me know, get my attention, speak up in the meeting, or you can type your comment in the box. If you're virtual, all meeting attendees, please mute your virtual microphone if you're not speaking. First item for business is public comment. Turn it over to public comment. Do we have any cards?
No, sir, we do not.
Cards, okay, then I will go straight to Chief Executive Officer Jessica Mefford-Miller's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the joint committees. Good morning. I have a few updates I'd like to provide you with today, focused just on some performance metrics. Good, thank you, Stephanie. Beginning with the complaint rate. So the graphic that you're seeing shows our bus complaints in purple and then our combined light rail and streetcar complaints in green. The valid complaints are shown here. Generally speaking, the complaint rates have come down. And just to note, our season-on-season ridership tends to be higher in the winter months, lower in the warmer months. And our complaint rate is the inverse of that. So our complaints tend to be lower in the winter months and higher in the summer months when all things in the valley heat up, of course. Couple of notes, our rail complaints have generally been declining over time. Our bus complaints still remain much higher than our acceptable threshold. This has a lot to do with pass-ups and missed trips. These are the most common complaint categories right now. We are focused on working with our contractors to increase our workforce, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and drive down those complaints. We've made good successes. It's not really bearing out yet in this data set, which ends at the end of February of this past year. As a reminder, we increased those wage rates in December of 2022. And so there's a little bit of a lag in the time that we actually see the improvement in service level and quality. Next slide, please. So taking a look at operator vacancy rate, our goal is shown in red, and that's roughly a 6% vacancy rate. And at that vacancy rate, we really can support all of our scheduled service with the help of overtime and operators working their regular days off. Our bus vacancy rate is shown in purple and our rail vacancy rate is shown in green. You can see that by February, those vacancy rates have been plummeting, which is wonderful news. We've always been fielding our scheduled rail service with the help of overtime and supervisors operating, but we have not been able to field all of our scheduled bus service historically. I am so pleased to report that in the East Valley, that vacancy rate continues to go down and our percentage of scheduled service completed is rising. So now we're just inside of 2 to 3% of missed trips. Any missed trips are unacceptable, but a tremendous improvement on our East Valley contract, which is now held by Transdev. We are still struggling in the West Valley. With rail service, we were able to hit, I think as I mentioned in our prior meeting, our workforce requirements for streetcar and light rail in advance of their Super Bowl festivities. Taking a look at ridership, also generally we're continuing an upward trend. Bus does remain sluggish relative to our rail system ridership. Our bus ridership is still down about 50% relative to pre-pandemic, while rail service ridership is down about 35%. I want to note in the event we have a correction in the future, we are experiencing some possible issues with our bus ridership data fidelity. This bus ridership comes from our fare box. We're moving through our fare system upgrade inclusive of back-end software. So we think we might have some undercounting associated with that bus probing. Stay tuned. We'll continue to work through this challenge and we'll reissue numbers in the event there is indeed an undercount. Even outside of that undercount though, which is relatively recent, bus service does remain sluggish, especially with our express and rapid service, our commuter categories. So April is Valley Bike Month, and this is a celebration that has been occurring here in the Valley since the 1980s. April is certainly a lovely time to get on a bicycle across the Valley. Encouraging bicycle commuting is actually one part of our Commute Solutions program. We have a huge number of individuals and companies who are enrolled in our Commute Solutions program across the Valley. Many of them are bicycle commuters. We'll be hosting an event on April 19th, beginning at Park Central, and then traveling downtown through to the Orpheum Theater. So that's an exciting opportunity for us to have kind of our little bike parade and celebrate Valley Bike Month. Staff tells me it is not a race, unfortunately. I was pretty excited about that prospect, but we will be out there along with our colleagues and fellow bicycle commuters. There are also over a dozen different bike events across the Valley. You can find out more at sharetheride.com, and that's our Commute Solutions website. It really is a portal for a lot of wonderful resources relating to commute alternatives. On Saturday, Mr. Ching, you're just in time to celebrate with us about Tempe Streetcar. On Saturday, at the Women's Transportation Seminar, Phoenix Chapter's 2023 Awards Gala, the Tempe Streetcar was awarded the Innovative Transportation Project of the Year, which is very exciting. The Tempe Streetcar is also going to be recognized later this month at the Arizona Forward Awards ceremony, where it will be recognized in the category of environmental sustainability. So congratulations to the City of Tempe and project teams on this award-winning program. It was nice to celebrate this project at this event on Saturday evening, where we had a large contingent of the project team there who happened to be women. So an innovative rail system project with a strong female leadership component, from planning, design to art to community engagement, was very impressive. So we congratulate Tempe. Also, special thanks to Valley Metro team members who are involved heavily in Women's Transportation Seminar. It is an important organization, an organization I have participated in for more than 20 years now. A special thanks and congratulations are due to our own April Trevette. She is our Capital Program Business Manager, and she is currently president of the Phoenix chapter of Women's Transportation Seminars. It was a big lift for us. Our own Lisa Miller organized the event on Saturday. So very well done, ladies. Looking ahead, we will be here for our Board of Directors meeting on April 20th. Audit Finance Subcommittee tomorrow, where we're going to continue the development discussion surrounding the budget process. Again, in May, we're advancing this budget process with a goal of a June approval before the fiscal year ends on June 30th. May I answer any questions for committee members?
Does anyone have any questions for Jessica? Seeing none, thank you, Jessica. That takes us to item 3, which is the minutes from the March 1st, 2020 to 2023 meeting. Are there any questions or comments on those minutes? If not, I get a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion. Second. And a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great, thank you. Motion approved unanimously. Item 4, which is the fiscal year 2022 transit performance report. I'll turn it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will invite Joe Gregory to the podium to provide the FY22 performance report.
Everyone, thanks for having me today. So we're going to go over the FY22 transit performance report. Now, this is a memorialization of the annual data in the same format every year, so we can compare it year by year throughout the years that we're looking at this. So for FY22, in context, this is all of the operators, all of the modes. So this includes, the Scottsdale routes, the Glendale, Phoenix, and Valley Metro. There was a 14% increase in total boardings from FY21. 70% of those boardings were from the bus. Valley Metro Rail had 3.77 boardings per mile, giving it the highest of any mode. Paratransit trips have a high on-time performance of over 90%. And Vanpool users pay an average of $5.18 a trip, giving an 86.8 fare box recovery for that mode. After seeing a decrease in ridership over the pandemic, we are seeing an upward trend from FY21 of over 4 million riders. And operating costs have continued to climb from FY21 to $835 due to a number of contract changes. Also, there was additional rail vehicles and rail maintenance starting in FY18, where you start to see it start to climb up there. And we'll continue to see these upward trends as the new service contracts go through in the following fiscal years. So for the bus, the historic trends, the bus boardings were up last year, over 2 million riders, or a 10% increase. And after losing ridership due to COVID for the last 2 years, we are seeing a weekday increase of 14%. On the weekends, though, we're still continuing to see a decrease. Saturdays are down about 5%, and Sundays as well. So the average fare collected, you see FY21 we were continuing to have backdoor boarding for most of the year. We ended the backdoor boarding in FY22, and so there's about 9 months of front door boarding in this FY22. You see it's starting to get back to where it was in FY20. So on the bus on-time performance, it is a little bit lower, but it is as the post-COVID traffic returns to the roads. But we are currently working on a runtime analysis to increase the OTP of all the Valley Metro operated routes. On the rail, also the boardings were up. It saw a 30% increase in boardings from FY21, which is the highest of any mode. And again, the fare collection was also up to 62 cents. We've seen an increase in the fares purchased post-pandemic compared to during the pandemic levels, when a lot of the people, especially during the backdoor boarding portions, people weren't buying as many passes before. For the OTP, again, this is down a little bit, down to 72%. But during 3 months of the FY22 is when we had the single tracking in downtown Phoenix. So that brought down the OTP a little bit. And we've recently made a schedule adjustment to add runtime to the rail schedule, which should bring it up for the next following fiscal years. We're also working with the cities to look at signal times change in order to have the rail run a little bit more efficiently. Streetcar, this was its first year in operation. It was actually started on May 20th. So this is representing 42 days of streetcar. But in that short time, there was about 60,000 boardings in those 42 days. And we'll just continue to see them increasing year over year over the next few years. And lastly, in paratransit, paratransit continues to show a high on-time performance at over 90%, while seeing a decrease in operating costs per revenue hour. We're seeing a higher transition towards ride choice, which also benefits the riders as it gives them a little bit more flexibility. So with that, does anyone have any questions about the TPR?
Yes, Mr. Ching.
Thank you for the report. Is one of your KPIs also customer service and tracking complaints?
Mr. Chair, member of the committee, that is not one of the KPIs in this report. That's in, we do track that in separate reports, and especially the monthly reports that we've been providing through Jessica too.
Do we have any annualized pre, during, and post-pandemic tracking or trends that would be in terms of customer service?
Yes, Mr. Ching, we certainly have that data, though I don't have it at my fingertips. We would be happy to compile that and share that with the joint committees if you'd like.
Not necessarily if it's out of order. If it was already coming to the committees, that's different. Is that a report that would normally come back to the committees to see?
It doesn't.
Yeah, we mostly just show month to month in these kinds of things, but we can show a year over year, and especially going back to the pre-pandemic levels, we can make a different write-up of that.
Okay.
I think it'd be.
Because you collect all this at the same time,
Right.
ridership, on-time performance has a direct bearing on customers' satisfaction, I would assume, with the service,
Very much.
Right.
as does tracking complaints year over year and whether or not they're going up or going down or staying the same.
Yes, very, very much so. And at the top of the meeting in the CEO comments section, Mr. Ching, we had a brief discussion on customer complaint trend data. And are those slides included in the packet?
Not your CEO comments,
Okay.
no, but we can
Yep.
send them out later today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send those out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
You know, I think thinking about this, it is in the quarterly report. So there's a much larger quarterly report that is provided to the committees, and customer contacts or customer complaints are included in that report. So we'll send a refresher with both of those pieces out.
I appreciate that. When I think about transit performance, the things that you've listed here are clearly relevant to it, but I would also contend that complaints and overall satisfaction with the service would also have a direct bearing on the performance of the transit system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Joe? Thank you for the presentation, Joe.
Thank you.
Item 5 is travel expenditures and solicitations presented for information only. Any questions by members of the committee? Okay, no questions. Takes us to item 6, which is report on current events or suggested future agenda items. Any members have anything to report or request here? Hearing none, that concludes the meeting with a reminder that our next meeting of the TMC RMC is scheduled for May 3rd at 11 a.m. So we will adjourn the joint meeting of the Transit and Rail Management Committees. That takes us to the convening of the Transit Management Committee meeting. And we will go to the consent agenda. Are there any questions or requests to pull the consent agenda for comment? Hearing none, I would request a motion and a second for approval.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item 2, which is the proposed October 2023 service changes. And I'll turn it back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll again invite Joe Gregory, our Manager of Service Planning, to the podium to provide information on our proposed service changes for October.
Hi, everyone again. So we do have a number of changes on here, as you can see on the memo. Mainly, we have 3 main major service changes. Route 48, which would be an extension on Rio Salado to Mesa Riverview. And then the 2 eliminations of circulators in the West Valley, elimination of the POGO and elimination of the Zoom. The rest of the changes are mainly schedule adjustments and some runtime changes. And we're still a little bit wordsmithing a few of the Phoenix changes. So when you see there may be a few differences in the board packet when you see that, but not with the routes, just with some of the descriptions of how we're describing this. But we will be starting the public outreach in May, and we'll be having our webinar and public hearing in this room in May 17th, I believe. Any questions about these?
Anyone have any questions about the route changes? Service changes? Okay. Seeing none, we will move to item 3, which is the fiscal years 24 to 28 short-range transit program. Back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendations are included in your packet. These are recommendations that we are requesting the committee forward to the Board of Directors for acceptance. Carol Ketcherside, our Director of Service Planning, is here to answer any questions you may have about these recommendations.
Any questions on the short-range transit program? Hearing none, this is an action item. So we would need a motion to move this forward to the board. Can I get a motion and a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving along quickly here, we're going to the item 4, which is the Transit Life Cycle Program. Plus update. Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Paniagua. I'd like to invite Ken Kessler to the podium. Ken will provide an overview of proposed updates to the TLCP, or Transit Lifecycle Program, that we are requesting the TMC forward to the board for approval and acceptance.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm going to give a brief overview of the bus TLCP update for 2023. Just want to note there are some additional slides and information in the packet from this presentation. This presentation does not include all that information, just for the sake of time and getting through the presentation. So first, just an overview sort of where we're at. The most recent approved update to the TLCP was in September 2019. With the uncertainty caused by the COVID panic or pandemic, there've been a lot of moving items in terms of revenues, expenditures, services, and so forth. And so there has not been an official board-approved update to the TLCP, and staff feels it's appropriate to get an update approved by the board here in this month's process to make sure we have that on the record. Some key revenue impacts, just want to highlight here. The sales tax revenue obviously going higher since the first couple months of the pandemic saw the big drop off. There's been a fairly substantial amount of COVID relief money added to the program. And of course, with decreased ridership, fare revenues have been pretty significantly decreased since the onset of the pandemic. So just a quick look at the sales tax forecast. This is the RPTA, the bus share. This isn't the entire PTF. So the last ADOT forecast we had in 2019's board-approved update was the 2018 forecast, just due to the timing. ADOT's forecast usually comes out in September to October timeframe. And so the 18 forecast was used in that update. And similarly, we're using the most recent forecast now, 22, follow 22 forecast by ADOT. And you can see there about a 16+% increase on the sales tax revenues since the last update. As I mentioned, the COVID relief funding for RPTA operations, you can see here about 117 million, almost 118 million infused into the bus program from the federal COVID relief funding that we received. I just want to touch on some of the key assumptions in the TLCP, specifically in this update. Obviously increased bus labor rates, other wage rates as well, included in this update, reflecting the current inflationary impacts and moving forward. We do have some sort of contingency assumptions built into future contracting that's to occur here within the timeline of the remaining years of the TLCP, just to ensure that we're programming conservatively to capture any potential cost increase and any of the new contracts going forward. Planned fleet acquisitions, obviously the cost of fleet has increased. So we've built that in here as well as the timing of fleet. The results of the supply chain issues caused by the pandemic have kind of delayed some of our replacements. So we're reflecting a more current schedule of actually acquiring those fleet replacements. And then lastly, the fare collection system modernization project, reflecting some better known O&M cost estimates. At the last update, we just had sort of some rough estimates on those costs. And we now have contracts in place, and we have annual costs for the O&M once the fare collection system is fully deployed next year. And just some of the key operating program changes. Obviously, the sales tax, the reduced fare revenue, and the COVID relief money on the revenue side. And then on the expense side, a number of things that have been updated: inflationary impacts, set aside for Scottsdale funding of their JE in the program, as well as the SRTP adjustments that have occurred since the 2019 update. And then again, having the retail network and customer service contracts in place for the fare modernization project, building into the programming those known costs. And here we have some of the key capital program changes since the last update. North Glendale Park and Ride, it's reduced scope. Avondale Transit Center and Gilbert Park and Ride have been added. Phoenix has canceled the Levine Park and Ride, and new bus stop construction improvements were programmed by the town of Gilbert and city of Scottsdale. And then fleet plan changes, as I mentioned, updated the replacement plans based on timing and costs, as well as the paratransit fleet due to RPTA taking those vehicles in-house, and those vehicles going forward no longer being provided by the contractor providing the service. We had to add those vehicles back into the plan. And then reduced van pool replacements as a result of the participation in the van pool program being reduced as a result of the pandemic, and additional remote working and things like that. We're seeing some growth in the program, but certainly a ways away from the peak of our van pool program a few years ago. I just want to show just a comparison of the net revenues and expenditures for the CLCP. So we do show about a $10 million increase in overall net revenues less expenditures. That's primarily due to, you can see on the revenue side is up, the expenditure side is up. We have a number of factors that I've already mentioned that have impacted revenues and expenditures. The additional thing here that's causing the net revenues less expenditures to go down as well is really cities programming what was locally funded service into PTF to utilize their jurisdictional equity funds in the PTF. And so speaking of jurisdictional equity, or JE, that's kind of the overarching priority guiding principle on the bus side. And so, and again, it applies only to the bus side. And so there have been some changes. Cities have requested some of their services have increased PTF funding that were locally funded. And just want to mention, we've worked with the cities to make sure we stay within the plus or minus 2.5% policy allocation. And that's at a sub-regional level in the policy. And then as well, each specific jurisdiction needs to be within 7.5 million of its specific jurisdiction allocation. And that has been accomplished through the recent reprogramming efforts. And so here's a recap. This is kind of like the bottom line here, right? So this is the sub-regional JE, and this is where each sub-region sits. So each sub-region is within about 1.5% of the allocation. So all well within the policy requirements. And then one thing that came up through sub-regional meetings and also as a result of MAG sort of providing some clarification on Prop 400, specifically balances that may carry forward from the Prop 400 timeline beyond that, whether it's in Prop 400 extension beyond December of 2025. jurisdictions wanted to have the comfort to know that the Prop 400 monies collected within the Prop 400 timeline are governed by the same rules, and specifically the JE policy. As part of the action we're going to request going to the board is going to be to include that policy clarification. And this allows the cities to sort of not have this lose it or use it mentality, trying to spend every dollar of their projected JE between now and December of 2025. And so with that, this is the recommendation, again, including that policy clarification that the member cities requested. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Or, sorry, Ken. Still stuck on Joe. Joe had such great presentations that I can't get over it. Thank you, Ken.
Sure.
So does anyone have any questions? Yes, Chris.
So, am I on or off? Help me understand, because I'm looking at the detailed charts by East Valley and by different jurisdictions. I understand you're trying to balance out for that whole region. Well, even the more specific ones that you had in the backup slides. Where does the decision made? Because sometimes by jurisdiction, the percentage change or over under can be quite dramatically different than 1.5%, 2%. It could be, I mean, some of these, I see differences of 50% and 45%. And granted, they're smaller jurisdictions, but how do those decisions get made where, allocations are made which are significantly different than for that particular jurisdiction? Granted, I get the idea of balancing out the East Valley, West Valley, but it seems like inside of that, there can be some pretty large variations. Where does that decision made? How is that balanced out?
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, Committee Member Brady, those decisions are made by the subregions themselves. So the city staff from each subregion meet on a periodic basis, recognizing the policy is at the subregion level because it would be impossible to have a policy similar to the subregion policy at the actual jurisdiction level. One reason being when the Great Recession hit and all this was rebalanced and everything, there were already jurisdictions that were over allocated. Buckeye's an example. They had a park and ride that was built early in the program, and their allocation based on the revised dollar amounts put them way over allocated. And there's no way to take that back. And other jurisdictions that had service through that time frame when the rebalancing happened, they were already over allocated based on the new revenue forecast. So it's really meetings with the sub-regional staff from each city that get together on a periodic basis and decide. And yeah, I recognize definitely there are some big swings among cities within each sub-region. And that's just some of the results of the way the original program was laid out, the impacts of the Great Recession on revenues, and then how to best balance the overall program going forward. But as far as deciding, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and your number's going to end up here and your number's going to end up there, that's a collaborative effort among the cities within each subregion.
Just another question is, so how do you manage these balances? And jurisdictional equity isn't really considered in the next Prop 400E, is that correct? Or is it?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess I look at these funds that are falling to the bottom. I don't know if they're really considered ongoing. So how do you make decisions about routes and bus service, which has it kind of implied it's going to be there for, extended period of time. And yet you may have balances here that may only be sustained for a shorter period of time. So how do you balance out starting a new route for dollars or a certain amount of dollars, and then, but it only may last for a couple of years? How is that all brought into the conversation?
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, Committee Member Brady, the approach for that in the Prop 400 extension plan that MAG put together, they based the baseline service that would be funded on the 2019 short-range transit program, what was programmed at that time to be in service and funded by PTF by the end of Prop 400, December of 25. So that was sort of the baseline going forward. And then they developed a sort of a formula program based on performance metrics in terms of what additional bus service would get funded. They had a certain amount of money set aside in the program to fund additional service, but it was performance-based because they wanted to obviously get away from the JE concept and make, choices for service where it made sense to have service. And so what we have here are really balances that are projected to be there at the end of Prop 400 that cities, subregions can choose to use going in beyond Prop 400 time horizon. Based, and that is the policy clarification, right? That's based on the current rules of jurisdictional equity. So, because without that clarification, there were cities that were like, it was like the gold rush. It's like, all right, I'm going to go spend every dollar I have projected in the plan between now and 2025. And so in an effort to avoid that, because if revenues take, a southern turn, now all of a sudden we got to cut back service potentially, or the cities had to pivot back to local funding for service that they moved into Prop 400 funding. So those are kind of the processes to deal with that.
Thank you.
All right, excellent questions. Any other questions for Ken?
Chair, this is Mark from the City of Scottsdale.
Go ahead, Mark, and then we'll go to Jason.
Yeah, Ken, I know we've had some discussions over the past months regarding Scottsdale's JE. Over time, we've kind of accumulated a sizable amount of funding, and I think part of that is, as you know, is we're pretty judicious in our spending on transit. But we've also put in requests to utilize that funding in various ways to move us forward. But the short of it, I think, is that Scottsdale, I think, in doing the right thing, has somewhat been penalized by the way we think using our funds wisely, and also held back in having some of our service use some of this funding, our local service. And I guess if you could also, you brought up the idea, on one of the slides, JE set aside for Scottsdale, if you don't mind also talking about that. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I was not in the meetings when the determination of the JE set aside for Scottsdale happened, but I'm aware of kind of the overall situation there. That was a set aside of a certain amount of funds to bring Scottsdale within the $7.5 million over allocation policy, and programmed, but not programmed for any specific service at this time. Mark, to I think the point you raised about trying to use the funds for some local service, it's been the position of MAG as well as Valley Metro that the intent of the Prop 400 funds were to be for what's considered regional service and not local service like circulators. I know we've had some discussions about the Scottsdale trolley, but we're trying to maintain consistency across the whole region in terms of the way the funds are used. And so that's why we did the set aside, so that the funds were programmed, not yet for specific service. Perhaps it could be something that Scottsdale could use to fund service into the time beyond Prop 400, as kind of is the intent to do with these balances, if these balances actually come to fruition.
Ken?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Ken and the planning staff, just wanted to thank you for your work on this. This is something that we've been asking for quite some time, this update. I know we haven't been able to update this TLCP for many years for a variety of reasons, but just wanted to thank you for making this happen and all the work that you've done with all those sub-regional meetings. I know it hasn't been as difficult of a discussion as it was during the Great Recession, but there's still been some challenging topics that we had to work through as sub-regions, and I think you guys did a great job, and the planning staff as well. So thank you.
Appreciate that, but I want to deflect the credit to where it really belongs in terms of the TLCP. Josh Hope is the keeper of the TLCP, and he's done tremendous work to work with the cities and as well as our service planning group in the member cities to get this done.
Just a quick comment. I think we have to be really careful about these balances on two different fronts, right? The whole debate about the future of Prop 400 is centered around how much of this is going to go to bus transit as part of the big conversation. If someone finds out there's tremendous balances that are still unspent, I think it goes to the argument that it's not needed. Cities can't even use what they have allocated for transit, so there must not be a demand for it. So I think we have to be careful with that. And on the other hand, I worry about the times running out on the source for transit, and are we going to need it to carry us forward?
Right.
So we're going to have to figure this out. But politically, I think there's great risk on one hand of saying, bus service is down and cities have tremendous, resources in excess of what they've collected to provide the service. So I think as all these communities, when we're making these decisions, we can't just make them in our own little bubble. We have to think about the context of the larger debate that's taking place out there. I don't have the right answer because I can see how you could try to go both ways, is maybe we need to hold everything we can and try to extend this beyond the deadline. But on the other hand, that could be used against you, saying you don't need it. You can't even spend what you're getting. So anyway, I'm not giving you an answer to the problem, but hopefully when we're having these dialogues and making these decisions, I think we have to have the broader context. Think about that too. So
Absolutely agreed. You're right. There is no right answer. We're working, with forecasts and, granted, we shorter and shorter timeline as we move forward, right? So, hopefully closer and closer we get on those forecasts, and we wouldn't really prefer to have this show like a zero balance, because if revenues do go down, then now we're scrambling to figure out how we're going to rebalance. And I would say if we look at the numbers up there, I would say that 21.8 billion or million balance is really almost one tick in the economy, and that's gone. So and honestly, from a conservative standpoint, I think it's pretty tight. So yeah, I would hope nobody would take this and go, oh, look at all that money. It's $1.5 billion total. We got 21 million, look at the percentage. And again, if revenues go down just a slight tick, that's gone. So yeah, it's a tough balance to strike for sure.
That's good.
Yeah, I would say, thank you for bringing this up, Mr. Brady. It's absolutely relevant to the conversation about the cost of bus service, the need for bus service, and our future funding source. We have 20 months and 3 weeks roughly left, if you're counting, I'm counting today, of Proposition 400. We'll be drawing down some of these funds over that course. And so carrying a balance until we have an assured revenue source, I think is prudent for us as an organization. Following the governor's veto back in July, one of the first things this board asked was, how long can we sustain? And at that time, our estimates were best case 6 months. And we have spent some of that funding over the last 6 months. We've spent some of it on things like wage rate increases. We're, of course, preparing for a potential tick in the economy. We're also looking to define where bus service investments might need to be made as we emerge from the pandemic with our ridership. So I feel comfortable with this. I would feel less comfortable at this stage if we weren't carrying a balance, but we should absolutely continue the conversation both at a regional level and at a sub-regional level.
Okay, any other questions for Ken? So one question I have, Ken, is as you talked about the overall fund balance going even beyond just the Prop 400 revenues, that there was actually a decrease of about $10 million since the last time this TLCP was updated. In that time, you had $129 million more in revenue projected for Prop 400 revenues. I think you said it was about $118 million in federal relief. But at the same time, obviously, cost escalations and fare revenues were down. And I believe you mentioned that the allocations to the cities reflected changes as well that kind of captured that Prop 400 revenue. I just wanted to make sure I got your assessment of kind of why we ended up with a difference, with a lower fund balance, even though we had all those additional revenue sources.
Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct. You captured it. Spot on.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ken. All right, I got your name right this time. It's not like 20 years. So, all right.
Not like we ever didn't ever work together before, I think, right?
All right, thanks. Any other questions before we move on to a motion? The recommendation is to move forward with this TLCP update to the Board of Directors. Can I get a motion and a second? Motion.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, we've got a unanimous approval.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That takes us to item 5, report on current events and suggested future items. If anyone has anything for good of the order. Again, our next meeting is May 3rd. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our Transit Management Committee meeting today.
Okay, we will now convene the Rail Management Committee meeting for Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. First order of business, the consent agenda, which is presented for action. Are there any questions or are there any items on the consent agenda that need to be pulled for separate discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would like to pull item 1D because I want to make a separate motion on that.
Very good. So item 1D is pulled from the consent agenda. That leaves items 1A, B, and C. We have a motion?
Was that your motion? I was sorry.
No, I was just saying this was left.
I would move approval for items 1A, 1B, 1C.
Second, sorry.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda, with the exception of item 1D, which has been pulled for separate consideration. All in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now return to item 1D.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I mentioned that I do have a motion for a change on this item on the list of points of interest that are identified for the Broadway Road and Central Avenue Station. I would like to add a point of interest. I've spoken with Valley Metro staff and understand that this would not create any problems, and we can do this to add the Ed Pastor Transit Center as an identified point of interest at that station. I would make that into a motion.
Okay, thank you very much. So the item for approval is item 1D. Second. Station names for the South Central Extension Downtown Hub Project. The motion is for the item as approved with the addition of Ed Pastor Transit Center as one of the points of interest to be added to the list.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion as stated and amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Item 1D passes unanimously. We will now turn to item 2, which is the 2023 Transit Lifecycle Program Rail Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll again ask Ken Kessler to provide an update. Ken, please.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the rail TLCP update, basically very much the same information as RPT on the overview, so I won't spend any time on that. Same result here, different dollar amounts. This is the rail portion of the PTF. Same percentage increase, of course, coming from the same source, 16%. The COVID relief money received by VMR, very similar to the amount received by RPTA, almost $116 million. Just wanted to highlight some of the changes from the 19 TLCP update to this update. Some of the timing of revenue service for the various projects in the plan. And then highlighting some of the capital project changes. You can see here some of a lot of the changes. A common theme here is cost increase across a lot of these projects. Obviously, in that time frame, at the time, we were already experiencing some increases in some materials and labor, but certainly the pandemic and all the issues surrounding it have really caused a more dramatic increase in those areas. Some other project changes that have occurred in the program since the last updates. 10 West being deferred beyond Prop 400. The introduction of the Fare Collection Modernization Project. There has been some need for civil work at the rail platforms in order to accommodate the validators and the new ticket vending machines that will go in. So that was not in the 19 program update because those costs were not known at the time and we're very early in the fare collection project. Additionally, some additional funds for the Third Avenue Loop for the South Central Downtown Hub project, actually SIMPA project. And then an additional 16 million of PTF funds have been programmed for project development in the program. So some of the good news things that have occurred since 2019, not to focus all on cost increases and timeline changes, the full funding grant agreements for both South Central, Downtown Hub, and Northwest Phase 2 were signed and put into place since that last update. The ARPA program added an additional 81.3 million for the South Central Downtown Hub project and 17.4 million for the Tempe streetcar project. And that was helpful in alleviating some local funding sources for those projects. And just a little bit more good news. So those FFGAs for South Central and Northwest 2, the appropriation and allocation of those funds were advanced pretty quickly. There was an expectation early on that those funds would be flowing in through the end and beyond the end of the projects, as we've experienced in the past with previous rail projects. However, with the bill increased funding levels for transit, those funds were able to be appropriated and allocated to those projects and the full amounts programmed through federal fiscal year 22. So we're receiving those funds earlier than we had anticipated. And then in the 23 federal appropriations, there was yet another additional 21 million program for the South Central Downtown Hub project, an actual increase to the FFGA dollar amount there. And then here's just some the changes in the corridor cost estimates from the 2019 update. And some of this is cost increases, some of this is timing changes. And then some of the other capital costs in the VMR capital program. Just want to note on the OMC expansion, the decrease there, the increase on corridor planning, that's really a result of that additional project development that I spoke about on a previous slide. And then the capital revenues, just want to point out here, a lot of the Phoenix T2050, that's really due to timing of project costs. And then here's the net cash flow on the VMR side, showing a fund balance at the end of the program projected to be 16.3 million. Again, given the overall size of the program, a very tight fund balance left at the end of the program. And with that, here's the recommendation for forwarding the approval of the update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there questions from the board? No questions. This item is on for action, which means I would, at this point, entertain a motion in a second.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor of forwarding this to the board of directors for approval of the TLCP rail, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3 is report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Are there any reports from members or any future agenda items suggested for this meeting? Hearing none, we'll close item 3. Item 4 will note that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 3rd, starting on or about 11 a.m. And we are adjourned.
Go on, Andrew.
Good, how are you? Good. It's nice to know. 150-year-old motor brings it like the streetcars want to innovate. Pretty good.
Just see ya.
I guess it's because we don't use a horse to pull it through the streets anymore.
Now, the old's becoming the new thing, I guess.
Maybe it's, a lot of it's off wire and battery powered, so we don't use the overhead electrical lines. So that was innovative.
Yeah, so it's good.
Yeah, it's
Is
good.
it, and it's,
Ridership has been really good. I mean, it passes along the southern